Welcome to Returned to Honor, guiding members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to declare with confidence, I have recovered and returned to honor through faith, repentance, and a confident testimony in the atonement of Jesus Christ. Welcome everyone to this episode of Returned to Honor. My name is Brett, and today I want to talk a little bit, or this episode I want to talk a little bit about goal setting and a parallel that came out yesterday during a session with a client. A lot lately has been talked about the 10 virgins in Matthew 25. And as the client and I were talking, the thought came to mind, the parallel from what I was teaching him to the parable of the 10 virgins. So I want to share it with you here. When we're looking at change and goal setting and just general activities of life, there is an idea that I learned years ago that I was teaching my client that directly correlates with the 10 virgins. So that idea is this notion of through, not to. When we're setting a goal, when we're making a decision in our life, when we're taking any action, we need to establish it through the event, the goal, the outcome, and not just to that event. And as my client and I were talking about his addiction issues and trying to get himself in a place where he was constantly available to go to the temple, he was telling me about how he had worked really hard to get it so he could go to an event with his sister and her getting ready to go on a mission and receiving her endowment, and then also being able to go to the temple so that he could be there with a cousin that was getting sealed. And this idea of through, not to, came back to mind. Now let me explain this. When, looking at it from the parable of the 10 virgins, let's just open it up real quick. So, then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps, and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. And they that were foolish took their lamps, but took no oil with them. So here in this we see they went forth to meet the bridegroom. And as he and I were talking, this notion of through, not to, came to mind because 5 had prepared themselves, had brought with them oil, had brought with them extra oil, that they had enough that when the bridegroom came, they were able to go through the doors and into the wedding. The other virgins in this story, they brought their lamps, they came to the door, but they hadn't done everything they needed to make sure that they could go through and into the actual event. And so as this client and I were talking and discussing what this means and what it means for him and his life, we talked about this notion of it's one thing to get yourself ready and prepared and to do all of the actions necessary to get to the specific gate, the door, the entrance. But when we start thinking through is when we're thinking past and now into life after that event. The 5 foolish, they made it to the gate. They were at the door, and they had done everything that they needed to recognize that it was time to go to the event, that it was time to get everything they needed, everything that they had, but they did not think it past that doorway, past that specific action of getting to the gathering. So how does this apply in our life? And what is it that we need to think through, not to? Well, so many people, when they are talking about like addiction or change or any kind of goal setting, especially if it's, say, a chemical, we talk about it in terms of sobriety. When I was teaching these concepts and working in a rehab treatment center, I would often ask them, how many of you came here with the goal of becoming sober? And they would all raise their hand, obviously, because that was why they wanted to be there. And then I would ask them, how many of you have been here longer than a week and are pushing into 2 weeks? And depending on the number and the month and the rotation that we were on, several of them raised their hand. And I would ask them, have you used any substance? And they were like, no. All my drug tests are great. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, or else you wouldn't still be here. Then haven't you achieved your goal if your goal was to be sober? Haven't you met it? Because by all chemical counts, you would test showing that you are sober. And then we would talk about the real goal, the real objective, the through, not to, because they had achieved sobriety. They had been able to master the withdrawal. They had been able to, in that environment, come to a place of stability where they hadn't gone out on their time away from the house and, excuse me, and used. And yet none of them would consider themselves sober yet, because they hadn't gone through it into life after reaching that certain point where they had come to the point of sobriety, but not through into a life of sobriety. And that is the biggest difference, is that transition of getting to the door, but then also moving past and into that new life. Here in the parable, the 5 foolish virgins, they made it to the door, but unlike the 5 wise, as it says here in verse 7, then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said unto the wise, give of us your oil, for our lamps have gone out. I didn't prepare for anything past coming to the door. I don't know that I'm strong enough to keep going. Can you share with me? Can I lean on you? Can you help me through this? And the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there not be enough for us and you. Now this is so incredibly important, because many times we try to lean on others, looking for them for their support, for us for support and strength, when they're not even fully there yet. They don't have that resilience, that strength in themselves yet. And so these wise were also wise in that they said, no, I don't have enough even for myself yet. You need to go to those that have been at it a little bit longer, those that have a little bit more. And so on this idea of change, who it is that we are seeking support from, who it is that we're going and getting our counsel and our advice and leaning on, is critical as well, because as so importantly stated, lest there not be enough for us and you. Sometimes those that we want to lean on, we look to, for example, are just clinging on by themselves for their own self. But this idea of through, not to, pairs with another concept that goes hand in hand. And this verse 9, lest there not be enough for us and you, plays to that, and that is the notion of so I can. I want to set my goal and my objective through the event, through the gate, through the door, not just to it, so I can. And then you bring in why it is that you want it, what it is that you're looking for, how it impacts you personally. Lest there be not enough for us and you. I can't give of mine, or else I can't have enough for myself because I don't have extra. So I can is that deeply personal, very individual reason that we're making the change. For this client that I was working with, when we started talking about why he wanted to not just get to that point of having a recommend, not just getting to that point of somebody saying, yes, you can go to the temple, but actually through that experience into a life where he was always able to have that recommend. He talked about, so I can feel that feeling that I had when I was in the temple, so that I can feel that peace, that strength, that incredible sensation inside, and have that with me all the time. Without a clear, distinct so I can, it's very difficult to think through and not just get stopped to. And so as you are contemplating your own journey and your own transition here and what it is that you're working on, why it is that you're doing it, start thinking past and beyond just getting to the gate, getting to sobriety, getting to abstinence, getting to the ability to have a temple recommend, getting to that point where you feel connected. But now think about it in terms of through. What is it that that's going to give you? What is the so I can for getting to it so that you can move through it? And that transition that happens as we cross the threshold and go into the wedding feast, because we have put our goals in the correct perspective. We've taken enough and we've built enough internal reserve so that we can actually cross over and have enough to sustain us. That is the power of through, not to, and the so I can. And it is so beautifully represented when we look at the parable of the 10 virgins, and we can be so much more like the 5. Many times it is just the fact that we are setting our goal through that door, through that gate, into that life, into that next phase, and not just to a specific event. When this first hit me I was teaching this, and I realized that I had done this not knowing this back in high school. So I wrestled back in school, and I had a goal in high school of going to the state championship tournament, and I did. And I would wrestle hard. I would go to regionals at the end of the season, and I would place in such a position that I could go to the state tournament, the state championship tournament. But because I had not set my goal through to what was on the other side, because I hadn't seen a true so I can have that memory, have that accolade, have that on my resume that I had achieved that, and everything that may have come from that in college or, in business, in life, whatever. As soon as regionals were over and my brain said, excellent, you're going to the tournament, my motivation immediately ended. My drive stopped. And then in that week in between the tournaments, I didn't wrestle near as hard. I wasn't as motivated to keep my weight into my weight class. And when I got to the state tournament, I did not have enough oil in my lamp. And I definitely didn't have any reserve. I lost to people that I had won earlier in the season without any trouble. Or the people who had a record of win and losses that was lower than mine. All because I had set my goal to the tournament and not through into the life of what it would be as a state champion. So we have to start rethinking and think more like the 5 wise virgins who took with them enough oil in their lamps to get through the gate and into that life with the bridegroom. Not just get what we need to, the minimal done to get to the gate. And when you do that, you actually are going to have increased strength along the way and are going to have more focus, drive, energy, and excitement about it. And then when you go through the gate, you can truly say, I have returned to honor, because it is no longer the life that you were living. It is a new life that you've entered. If you haven't yet and you enjoy any of this content, please share this. Please subscribe, like it, comment so I know what's going on in your life and how we can interact and deepen each other's journey. It doesn't matter if we're talking about major sins and addictions or whether we're talking about the small things in life that keep us out of the kingdom of heaven and so that we can't get through that gate. Everything that I bring to you here is so that we can all be ready for when the bridegroom comes and we're invited into the feast. Take care, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.